Isn't that an oxymoron? Effective stormwater pollution prevention plans. I just thought I'd bring it up here. Okay. By the way, I don't know if many of you realize, out of the 5 speakers here, 4 speakers here, 3 of them from Colorado. He lives right down the road from me. I've never met him once. Okay, let's talk a little bit about effective stormwater plans and what we need to do and why doesn't this work, because it's not going to work. So I get the push button again. There we go. Earlier there was description of what a SWIP is all about. Most people spend all the time on the one to the left rather than on the one to the right. And of all the plans designers need to do, the one to the right is by far the most important set of plans that you can make. That's the most important part of the SWIP. Why? Contractors are using them. And when we keep that in mind, and what I'm going to go through are some of the requirements that are now in effect for you and what you have to do in Hawaii. And if you look at these things, basically what we're talking about is there's a requirement to develop a plan before you start working out on the project itself. This is not going to work. So we go through on these things. There's 2 parts that I want you to be aware of, and we're going to cover them each to a certain extent, the drawings and the narrative. With the drawings, by far, for every designer in here, that's where you must make your best effort. And this means basically you do not want to follow only the minimum standards that's in a template. That's a guideline only, and that's what I want you to be aware of. You probably have all seen that template for the DOT. It's a great template. It has all the goodies you want to. But do not review these as the minimum requirement that I have to do and I'm done. You're designers. That means as designers, you have an education that has a lot of skills, construction skills, that has academic skills. If you don't know about vegetation, develop those skills. That's the type of stuff that does not appear in a guideline. Use them. Use them to help you get started. But don't rely on them and say, that is all I have to do. It's just the bare minimum. It's a guideline to do the job right. So let's take a look at Hawaii's requirements in here. And we're going to be talking about the various appendices that exist on here. And I highlight that to get a little bit of what's out there. I'm going to ask the question, what's NPDES mean? Anybody want to volunteer? You chickens, you. What does NPDES mean? All right, let's do it by hands. How many say it's the first one? How many say it's the second one? How many say it's the third one? How many say it's the fourth one? Who doesn't give a rat's? They won. Okay. People who chose number 2, you get the gold star for the day. National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. You had to be an attorney to come up with that name. That's the only I can figure out. But basically, we're going to concentrate on Appendix C. That's the one that you have to live by. It's the one there that is supposed to be up for renewal about 365 days from now, maybe a little bit more. And whether or not it's up for renewal, you're going to have to talk to the health department on these things. But it's supposed to come out there, and it should start to reflect what the EPA has said for the 2017 construction general permit, which the rest of the nation is, most of the rest of the nation is involved with right now. It's a permit that says you got to get it if you're going to disturb, lands that are greater than 1 acre, and there's exceptions even to that. It's basically saying that if you have water leave your construction site, you got to get the permit to let it leave. Otherwise, you cannot let it leave the construction site. And I wish you a lot of luck on that one to try to prevent water leaving your construction site in Hawaii. Because I understand it rains here compared to where I'm from. So, permit is simply saying you're permitted to discharge runoff. Now, how you discharge it is what every designer needs to be aware of. And the 2017 covers these same requirements, just in a little bit more intensity on some of the things that are involved on here. So I'm just going to cover a couple of little items in here. It does reference 1154, which is water quality. We're not going to go into the water quality very much, but there's plenty of good bathroom material here to read. But the thing about it is, there are limitations even on this permit. In other words, the permit itself will not take and permit you to discharge water to flow into a storm sewer system without a sanitary system, excuse me. And you can't use flocculants in there in your water, which is fine. There's so many limitations on it, and you've got to make sure that you, as a designer, get the permitted requirements out of your way. Who is it that you need to talk to, and so forth on down the line. If there's one word that I could take about what's the best BMP to use when you develop a SWIP or to develop any communications out there on the construction site, is that word, communication. We tend to say designers over here, contractors are over here, regulatory people are up over here. Why aren't we talking together? Good question. That's what needs to be done. That's the best BMP in the world. Somebody's phone. Hello, Mom. Okay, so as we go through on here, there are certain requirements that everybody who designs a SWIP should always include in your SWIP. Now, they may not appear in the guidelines. That's something you got to be careful of. Not directly. They may be indirectly. For example, you got to identify the discharge location where water leaves your site. Where does it leave your site? Well, that's involving something called hydrology. It doesn't say specifically do a hydrologic assessment. That's something that you as a designer should always do, is do a hydrologic assessment. Well, if you look at all these things, and I don't want to bore you with all these wonderful little things that you see into here, there are certain parts of this thing that I want you to be aware of, and that's this first one that talks in there, and I got to read a little close because I don't have good eyes anymore. The permittee, DOT, shall design, install, and maintain erosion control, sediment controls that doesn't say prevent erosion, it says minimize. Doesn't say prevent. There is not a single construction site in this state, any state in the United States, any place in the world that's in compliance. It's always a dynamic that you're trying to fix it up and make it work, which means you got to do BMPs, you got to do maintenance, you got to do everything continuously. How do you get in there and say, gee whiz, it rained here and knocked over our silt fence? Well, theoretically, you might say that's a non-compliant situation. It is if you wait 5, 10, 20 days to fix it. EPA wants you to fix it right away, within a day, maybe 2 days at the most. These are the things that should appear in your SWIP whenever you get going on it. We'll get out of this thing in a minute here because I realize that all of you have much more expertise on this than I am. All right, permittee is to minimize it. Let's go back to that one. It says in section 5.1.1.1, you're to minimize the amount of soil exposed to construction activity. It doesn't say grub out 6 miles all at one time. It says minimize. Designers, that is your task to make sure you get it done. So, erosion control is very critical, and there are certain deadlines that need to be done in here. For example, if you have a permit of slope that's already been final graded, They want you to do the erosion control now, not 30, 60 days from now. And not to put up a fiber roll only. A fiber roll on a hillside works good as long as it doesn't rain. If it rains, you got a problem with it. In other words, that's a sediment control that is not very good. So we got to do these things. And they got to be done within, if it's a temporary, or it's going to be moored for 14 days. Notice, temporary for 14 days, EPA says, and your own rules and regs say, stabilize it. If you're not there, and you're not going to be there for 30 days, you got to stabilize it before you leave that area. It's all part of your rules and regs. What's in the 2017 permit, just as a comparison? Now they're saying most of the area there, disturbance cannot exceed 5 acres. That's a hard one for highways, isn't it? That's a real tough one for highways. It's coming down, though, and they have certain requirements. If you have less than 5 acres, they have certain requirements if you're more than 5 acres. So all these things are coming down at you. And contrary to what the political climate says about EPA, it is not going to go away. We're going to be around. They're going to be around for a long time. Okay, permittee. Now, keywords shall account for identifying expected amount, frequency, intensity, and duration of precipitation. Notice all of them: amount, frequency, 2-year, 24-hour, 100-year, 24-hour, how much rainfall, inches per hour, and duration of it. You got to do hydrology. Every designer must do hydrology if you're going to be doing these right. Take a look at this little bar graph between Honolulu and how do you pronounce it? Kula? How do you pronounce it? Anybody help me on that one? Kailua, thank you. Notice the extreme differences here. The numbers on the top there. Honolulu, average precipitation is 17 inches. Colorado, Denver, Colorado, the average precipitation is 15 inches. You live in an arid or semi-arid environment here. Yet you go, 20, well, let's say an hour drive, not even that long, over on the other side. Look at what the precipitation is. 32 inches. Hey, that's a that's a humid climate over there. Go northward, it's going to get higher. Oahu, all the islands have this wonderful, unique thing that says basically, west side is more semi-arid, east side is more humid or tropical. Same thing holds for north-south. And it's not just Oahu, it's all the islands. So be aware of that thing. When you design something, if you're on the east side, you better count on lots of rain. It's going to impact you. On the west side, you're not going to have to be as concerned about there, but you've still got to be concerned about when the precipitation is going to occur. So all these things you've got to be aware of. I always look at these and say, okay, is there a risk when rainfall is going to come in there and impact my site versus the time when it's not? Well, what I have in the red is about the time that you can expect it. So right now, you're working on a job, rainfall is going to hit you. And I believe we saw a site where that came out there. You mentioned, I think you were saying you're, 2 days, 5 days are prevented from working? So, whereas you go in the other time, believe it or not, weather can be a BMP for you, depending if you use it that way. That's a designer thought pattern to think on here. So when we do this, we got to always take a look about the storm runoff. This again is a requirement for Hawaii. You got to take a look at everything that's associated with, identifies, the type of runoff events you're going to get, the soils of your area. If you do not do a soils assessment of your area, you're not developing a SWIP according to Hawaii regulations. You've got to do these things. It's as simple as that. And they say always try to discharge in vegetated areas. That's not always practical there. But basically, do you take a look at hydrology and the soils that go with it. Permittee is going to be responsible for installing BMPs prior to earth disturbance activities in a correct manner, inspecting them, and installing new BMPs as needed. That bottom one's the big one. If you have a BMP that doesn't work, get out there, find out why it doesn't work, and change it. But you got to go through the change order. I realize that. And that sometimes takes more time than you have in there. So, some of the requirements, and again, we're going to just hit some of the things that occur on here. They have something called natural buffers and sediment control, and this is one of the EPA's things, but it's all part of your regulations, that you've got to follow certain criteria if you're within 50 feet of the state waters. And somebody always asks me, and I ask this nasty question, is the Pacific Ocean state waters? Anybody have an answer? Well, think about it. I think it is, but that's just me. Notice on there the things you got to be careful with. Again, this is not me saying it. This is not EPA saying it. This is what Hawaii is saying. That all of you have those requirements that are right there, right now, to make sure that you do the job in a way that minimizes the sediment leaving the site. That's the big thing. That's all they're asking you to do. They have a certain requirement for stockpiles. I see a lot of good projects now where the stockpiles are covered with plastic. That's good. But it's got to be a workable stockpile too. And I realize there you got to get to them when you can. But you see what's being thrown up there. I'm not making the rules up. These are what the rules are that every designer in this room should be following today. Now, whether or not you do it, that's up to you. And again, I think you're going to find out a situation, EPA is not going to disappear. They're still going to put the pressure on there. Then you talk about dust, believe it or not. Fortunately, not the real dust storms that we have to worry about. Then we got steep slopes. 15% is classified to be a steep slope for Hawaii. Is there any slopes in your project that ever exceeded 15%? Like maybe all of them? Sometimes, depending where you're at. Preserve topsoil. Again, you're doing it. I see it out there, and that's a good job. Keep it up all the way on there. Minimize your soil compaction. It's kind of hard to do construction sites when you're putting in a culvert to minimize compaction on there. I realize that. But take a look at it. Can you do something different? And my favorite, protect storm drain inlets. Section 5. By the way, every BMP that I know of for protecting storm inlets in Colorado, New Jersey, Malaysia, Hawaii, and everything else, the only time they work real well is when it never rains. If it rains, it's one of the least effective techniques to reduce sediment downstream. You might be able to capture 5 to 10%, of the sediment in the runoff waters. It's not a good technique, yet that's the only one we got sometimes. Contaminated soils, they have everything involved on that. And remember, prevent means it cannot happen. So if we're to prevent the discharge of stormwater onto contaminated soils, that means you cannot let that occur. How are you going to do it? I don't know. You have to do and talk with the contractor, talk with the regulatory people, and everybody to make it work. So these are all things that we need to be interested in. And when we develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan, there's a template that's available. I saw it available through Hawaii on here, where it's fine and dandy. It has everything you want to. And the trouble with the template is that, let's see, oh yeah, I'm supposed to have silt fences over here. Yep, check mark. I got to put fiber rolls up here before it rains. Okay, check mark. That's not doing a job. You're just fulfilling your need to fill that in there because guess what? That's what the boss told me to do. Everybody in this room, you're a lot more smarter than that to say that's all we have to do. Is it the right BMP to use? If you take a look at what I've shaded out on there, all the orange part of it is the narrative. What is the least one that had the least amount in that template was the site maps. That's the most critical one you got, is your site maps. There are certain things that you need to do. They need to go through on the various site maps. We recommend ourselves to have at least 3 drawings, maybe 4 on here. And we go through and we say, okay, instead of having a single drawing that has everything in the whole world about the project, who the person lives north, who the person lives south, what do we have over here, what do we got for a station over there, and so forth, and occasionally insert inlet barrier over here, or do erosion control over here. We put too much on our drawings. So I'm advocating. I'm not going to say you're going to do it, but I'm advocating. Make a series of drawings. Make the first drawing just be what you would see what to put in before you do the actual construction on the site. What is it? Where do you put the fiber rolls? Where do you put everything? Why do we got to put it on everything on one particular drawing? Then we have a drawing that's going to end up being, if I had time to go through it, during the construction. And in the next class I'll be doing this a little bit more. But put on there, what do we install? Or what do we do and what type of schedule do we put in there in order to ensure that we minimize the discharge of sediment? Is there going to be failures? Yes. But that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's a bad person that has that failure and never cleans it up afterwards. Is it going to be expensive? It could be. Here's another one for designers. Erosion control saves you money. Doesn't cost you money. Long term. Use it as much as you can. Then we have the last one. What is the site going to look like? What are all the BMPs going to be there? What's going to happen for post-construction? These are all items now that we got to be concerned with, because that's what's required by the state of Hawaii. It's not required by me. It's not required by Bobby or anybody else in here. It's what the state requires of you. Does it mean that we're at a stage that we can't do anything? No. It just means we've got to talk. And again, I said it on last session. Get the room full of regulatory, designers, contractors, and inspectors and solve the problem. That's what we're asking to do. And it can be done. It's one of these things that you got to be careful there. So when we develop a SWIP, and I went through, that was about a 3-hour discussion that I just gave to you. No, closer to 6-hour discussion I just gave to you today. We have our other classes where we teach this, go a lot more detail in this. But document what is your site all about? You know, get those permits. What's the conditions? I've been amazed talking to some colleagues of mine that never, ever go out to the construction site before they build things. What in the world are you doing? That's not going to work. Get everything you can on there. Understand the soils. Understand the hydrology. That is a skill that I bet you in here, if I don't have 80 to 90% of the designers, they have that skill. Use it. Even though it doesn't require you on the template, use it, because it will save you and give you a lot of problems and solve a lot of problems. That's a big one right there. When you go out and talk to Troy or anybody else out there in the projects, they have this mat, they have this product out here, and this is going to be the best product in the whole world. Will you do me a favor? Ask them, where do I not use your product? Not where do I use it, where do I not use the product? And if he or somebody says, oh, you can start product anywhere you want to throughout the whole island, walk to the next vendor. Troy would not ever do that because I know him. But it's more important that you know the limitations. For example, I'll give you one that I talked about a while ago. If you have an inlet that's on a street grade, the worst thing you can do is to put a barrier in front of that inlet because it diverts the water downstream. Simple one. But how many of you have put an inlet and a barrier in front of it? Also, be careful of putting fabric material underneath a grate. It will likely clog up. You have a huge maintenance cost coming in there. So there's so many things that designers are responsible for here. And, you know, have a time schedule. Work it out. It's something that's going to be something there that's very tough. And that next one, common sense. Water's got to go downhill. It ain't going to go uphill. Be aware of it. And I'm sure nobody in the DOT's ever had anything with political problems, have we? It's a big, big problem. But that can be solved by talking. And as long as we talk, we're going to be in good shape. Thank you very much.